I've been looking forward to today because I thought I'm not going to over prepare for flow, as it were. So we'll see if this flow happens. But before I say any more, may I invite everyone just to take a pause of silence and just allow yourself to breathe a little bit more deeply and then to let go of whatever's been happening today so that you can be fully present with me and the others. Thank you all very much. I somehow feel I could stop the webinar at that moment because I think what we've just done is probably the most important thing we can do in life. Uh, I will explain. Let's go back a long time. When I was thinking about this webinar, I sent to Lynn a picture of myself. Myself was about 5 or 6 years of age. And it's a photograph that has always been dear to my heart, not because of me, but because of who I'm looking at in that photograph. I'm looking at my mother. And when I look at me now as an older man, uh, but looking at me as a child, I'm looking at little Neil's eyes, and they are really just, I can see how he's anticipating the future. They're so alive and full of love for Mum, who was the most adorable lady. She was very caring, and I know how I was feeling about her at that day, as I continued to feel about her for the rest of her life. Um, so little Neil started on this journey. When he was that age, he thought everything was going to be wonderful and smooth. But like all our lives, we have a mixture of ups and downs. And there were challenges during my childhood, which I needn't go into now. Um, but those challenges really, I think, made me in many ways. The family moved house and I was relocated in a new school with people I didn't know, all those sort of challenges I faced. Um, but it was a teacher who really, really inspired me as a younger man. But let's go to secondary school now. A man called Mr. Blacksall. Mr. Blacksall, I think, was inspiring. He spotted this somewhat shy little boy who was very polite. I know because my granny had taught me good manners. Very polite, but wouldn't say boo to a goose. And Mr. Blacksall said, "Oh, Neil," he said, "there's a part in the school play we'd like you to play. Would you do it?" And I thought, I'm not sure about this. Uh, but he twisted my arm, and I found myself in a Shakespearean play at the age of 12. And I thought, wow. And during that process, I found a new confidence. I let go of some of my inhibitions, and I found that a really enlightening experience. Um, Life continued on with different experiences that I had. But let us come up to the point where I left school. I left school at 16 without very many qualifications or anything like that. And um, I had to sort of go to night school to get enough qualifications to go to a college of education, a teacher training college. And I did that. And it was at that point at the College of Education, because I was always very interested in children and child development and what makes us all tick, really, what makes us the people we are. And so I wanted to be a teacher. I thought, well, I could combine what Mr. Blacksall taught me with teaching. And I ended up at Culham College, a most amazing place. And what I remember mostly about that was in the third year when I went on teaching practice. Uh, I was put in a little school called South Stoke Primary School in Oxfordshire, and the head teacher was a man called Peter Long. Now, Peter, I'm sure he's passed on by now, but Peter was an inspiration. This little three teacher school, and Peter had a class. He was the head teacher, but he had the juniors, as they were known. And I just watched him. He didn't get me to start teaching initially, although I was with him for a whole term. In those days, you had to have a whole term practice. And I just watched him and just thought one day perhaps I might be almost as good as Peter, but I never thought I'd be as good. I'll tell you why. He had this incredible ability to form relationships with children, appropriate relationships. He seemed to know exactly how to tap into young people and inspire them. He saw their differences, but addressed every person. And those children in that school would have done anything for him. He was so good. I watched him taking them for sport. He did music. He did everything. And then he said, Neil, over to you. But he became then an incredible mentor. And I watched Peter's methods, and he said, Neil, you could try this, try that. He was extremely creative. He was someone who gave children first-hand experiences. Let's go outside and listen to the birds. Let's go and paint together outside, down by the stream. He would do all sorts of things to give the children first-hand experiences and not copying from textbooks and things like that. So the children were highly motivated. I thought, I'm going to take that on in my career. So I left there. And let's go a little bit forward. Last week, I had a wonderful email from a lady who's a governor at a little school called Braywood School near Maidenhead. Now, that was my first headship when I was 26. And this lady said, oh, we've investigated who you were because the current head is retiring and she wants a plaque with all your names, all the head teachers from 1870 on this plaque, and she wants to know who you all were. And I was amazed what she'd found out about me. As I journeyed through education, I continued to be fascinated about how we enable people to be the best people they can be. And during my second headship, and then on to advisory work, that was always in the back of my mind. I then had the incredible privilege of being chief advisor of the Isle of Wight service. And it was there that I really started thinking about these things called values. Um, I started to go into schools and observe that children weren't seeming to have those sort of old-fashioned manners that children used to have. Why don't they? Why are they arguing so much? Why don't they have respect and all those sort of things? So that seed was sown in my mind, and it started me thinking, well, perhaps I ought to return to a headship. Perhaps I ought to see if some of the things I'd been thinking about and the privilege I'd had watching so many wonderful teachers and visiting incredible schools. I thought, wow, I'd like to do this. So I found this wonderful school in Oxfordshire called West Kidlington School. It was a primary and nursery school. And this was a school that was ripe for an experiment, really. The question I wanted to investigate was if you give the children access to words such as respect and tolerance, would it make a difference to them or not? Also, if you gave at the same time for them to think about it and to actually act out these values, what would happen? So we teamed up with Oxford University and ran an experiment. I decided I'd do a doctorate looking at this sort of question. And so I was again so fortunate to have Professor Richard Pring, the wonderful moral philosopher, guiding me. So he was my mentor during these 7 years. And Bridget, who's on the call today, There's Bridget. Hi, Bridget. She was the deputy head of another local school near to West Kidlington. Anyway, at West Kidlington, I started to look around for materials. What could we do to help the children to develop these values? So I found all sorts of things. And then a colleague said, "Oh, why don't you go to the Global Retreat Centre at Oxford? Uh, the folk called the Brahma Kumaris are there, and on a Thursday evening, they run a public talk. You might find out a bit more about values at a greater depth if you go there." So I went along and became a friend of the BKs, and I'm still a friend of the BKs 30 years later. Um, they helped me to really think at depth about values through those public, wonderful public evenings that we had. And so we ran the experiment. We gave the children access to a vocabulary which was community inspired. It wasn't just the 12 values of living values. We expanded the vocabulary, saying to parents in the community, what are the dispositions you'd like your children to develop? And so we came up with 22 values for West Kidlington. 22, 11 for year one and 11 the second year on a rolling program. And by the time the children reached year six, they had revisited the value 3 times at greater depth. So a spiral curriculum. And we started talking about the values in assembly, and then each teacher would go into depth in the classroom about a particular value. And at the same time, the value would be talked about implicitly. So when the children were coming in from break, the teacher would say, "Oh, well done, everyone. You've cooperated together very well." And so those words were being just currency in the school. Because I'd argued, why should science have its vocabulary, mathematics? Why doesn't morality, ethics have its value, have its vocabulary, which children are inducted to? Now, crucially, at assembly, we gave children time to be inwardly reflective. Now, 30 years ago, I didn't realize of doing that. I've realized more and more talking with neuroscientists who say, "Neil, 30 years ago, you were really onto something," because that is what the brain needs to have. It needs still times, quiet times. It needs time to go internal, to think about things. And so, living Values Foundation, I could name a number of folk who really do incredible work developing values in the world. Um, so West Kidlington was an incredible success. What did we find? Number one, the biggest effect initially by introducing values is on the adults. The adults suddenly go, "Wow, the children are now relating to us in a different way. We don't have to battle with them anymore. I feel different." My research at Oxford had all the teachers sort of talking about the effects on them. And they said it was just incredible to actually be thinking about the values themselves and becoming role models for the children. And that's the second thing. It is no use talking about values to children unless you are prepared to model the values yourself. That's ever so easy for me to say, because I know how difficult it is at times to model those values. We all have our moments when we go, "Ooh," we lose the plot, as it were. But we have to apologize and then come back. But being the role model is so important. Now, on the children, we found, people are always saying to me, what effects does it have on children? Number one is that it puts up academic diligence, so the children generally do better in their work. Behavior becomes, well, almost exemplary, as Bridget and others who have worked in values-based schools will tell you. Agency. Now, agency is the ability to do things yourself and get on and not wait till someone tells you. Agency is improved. What worries me in many schools now that I see in England particularly is agency is not, the volume hasn't been turned up. They're too much doing what they're told and getting through uh, the subjects, as it were. So agency is so important. So agency, improved behavior, agency, and the community. The effect on the parents was unbelievable. Uh, the parent body at West Kidlington was a normal group of people, and they first of all thought, "What's this thing about values?" But I had 100% support from them because they could see the difference in their children. So 30 years ago, we ran this experiment and it became successful. And the word then went out, and there are now so many schools. One doesn't know how many. And so we are delighted about that. Now, the road to sort of the inner curriculum. Uh, my wife Jane and I wrote a book called The Inner Curriculum. It's this little book here. Um, in order to look at ourselves, how, what's happening. And in the inner curriculum, I talk about the pause model, Pause, pause. And this is something you might like to try yourselves, or if you have children, try it with them. Uh, P for peace. Take some deep breaths. You start to calm down. Neuroception is the brain's ability to look around. What it does, what our brains do is they always look for threat. Not at a conscious level, but if we enter a room, we scan the room for threat. A very spiritual say, "Oh, I don't do that." Well, it's a part that's developed over many, many thousands of years. About that. For those of you who are listening, I'm sorry if the link is breaking up. Um, A stands for attention. Give yourself attention to your. So you have the A, the attention. PAU is you understand what's going on, so you relax. S is the wonderful thing. S stands for self energy. Self energy is your natural essence of who you are. All of you who are listening to me tonight, you have a wonderful essence that is you. Some people call it soul. Some people call it, as psychotherapists do, self, the innate essence of consciousness. There are many words for this. Sometimes when I'm speaking, I call it heart. So when you feel in that state, then you are more in control. You're less likely to lose your temper, do anything like that. So this is an incredible gift, self-energy, which then leads to the final thing, which is E, which stands for ethical intelligence. What we need in the world are children and adults who are ethically intelligent. That means ethical intelligence is the ability to ethically self-regulate your own behavior. Just imagine what the world would be like if all our leaders were ethically intelligent. I have great news to tell you in the last 5 minutes of this chat. Over the weekend, I had the honor and privilege with my wife Jane to be in Iceland. And we were attending something called the Spirit of Humanity Forum, where people from all over the world who are wanting a better world meet together to share. And we were invited to join with the Wellbeing Economy Forum. The Wellbeing Economy Forum is run by Iceland, Scotland, New Zealand. These countries are getting together to say, the old paradigm is finished. Looking for profit, having a materialistic way of thinking, that's old. It leads to war, as we're seeing. It leads to tension. It leads to people being me, me, me. Enough is enough. We have to think of another way. The Prime Minister the president of Iceland, Hala, she stood up. No, she didn't stand up. She was sitting and she talked. And she talked about a new way of being for leadership. She talked about how we must be inside first and then be outside in the world, that we need what I've been talking about. She said this is the only way for leadership. She had a great phrase, the way out for humanity is in. The way out for humanity is in.
I actually think we really need to rethink leadership at this moment in time, both from an individual level. I think this is a time where we need to really ask ourselves, who are we choosing to be at a time like no other for humanity? It is an individual decision that we all have to grapple with. And I firmly believe in a formula for leadership that it goes like this. It's inside of every one of us, and it is not the role or the platform or the position we hold. It is who we choose to be and what we choose to do at a time like this. So that's part of the conversation we need to have. And then the rethink on leadership in general is that we cannot approach it anymore in the silos that we have been approaching it in. Private sector in one silo, government in another silo, civil society and the third sector in another silo, citizens and young people in another silos. We need bridge builders, and we really need to all think about leadership as much more systemic than we have before, where collaboration becomes sort of the key muscle, along with courage and an awful lot of humility, because we have brought the world to this dire time for humanity by working in separation from ourselves, from each other, from the different sectors of society. So now we need to come together like never before. And the problem we have, Sandrine, is that no one teaches us to do this. Business school doesn't teach us to lead in this way. Public administration education doesn't teach us to lead in this way. Elementary schools or schools up, they don't really teach us to work with ourselves. And so we're sort of raised to leadership within a silo, and like the planet and people are somehow outside of ourselves, and the way forward, even peace, is somehow outside of ourselves, whereas all of this is really within ourselves. And so I'm sure Jude and I will go into this more, and I don't want to go too deep on the spiritual side for those who might not want to track along there. But the way out for humanity right now is in.
Yeah, that's
Inspirational, absolutely inspirational. Why I'm particularly mentioning Hala is that she said, isn't it a shame that schools are not teaching children to be self-reflective and that inner work? So I'm halfway through an email to tell her that, yes, there are schools that have been doing it for a long time, but we need the volume turned up. We need national leaders making the shift that Iceland is making, Sweden is making, Norway is making, Denmark is making. But we need more than the Scandinavian countries. We need everybody to say yes. I was talking to the head of food programs for the United Nations at the conference, and he's based in Central America, in Panama. And I said to him, you're doing so much work at the United Nations. Why isn't it working? Why have we got these problems? He said, Neil, the United Nations merely services national governments. The problem, Neil, in the world is that so many national governments do not want to solve the problems of the world. They are too interested in short-termism, getting elected by their electorate or whatever, or having control, as we see with some leaders in the world. So I said, well, is there hope? And he said, well, there is hope. We've heard it through Hala and the other leaders of the well-being economy. So what I'm inviting you all to do is, please, those of you who are values-based schools, please enable the children to be self-reflective. Help them to have an inner curriculum. so that they can be the best version of themselves, so that they can take control of themselves, so that they allow their essential nature, which is peace, which is purity, which is um, cooperation, which is all those lovely values words are a part of our essential nature. Mark Williams, Professor Mark Williams, a neuroscientist, said, Neil, we are a connected species. We connect naturally. All the stuff that's going on isn't our natural side. So we need to be that. So I hope you can join me. I just renewed after my visit to Iceland. I want to get out there even more. But I think those of us who are keen on this need to be a bit noisier. We tend to be rather self-effacing and lacking in ego, which is great. But we allow those other voices to take control in the world. So we need to speak out a little bit more clearly and say, enough is enough. We have to take our children and our world in a different direction. So education has to change. They said at the conference, within 5 years, the whole world's education will shift. If it doesn't shift, then we're in big trouble. I could go on, and I'm not going to. So thank you very much for listening to me. I was, if it had been longer, going to do some exercises with you, but time has been short. So thank you very much. Please do contact me with any observations. Do keep in touch. Let me know that you're a part of our not quiet revolution now, but a somewhat noisier revolution. Thank you very much, Gladstone, and thank you everybody for listening so wonderfully to me tonight. Thank you.